Okay, so we're in the middle of calving season. Calf health, key, okay, to future lifetime performance of the herd, getting these young animals reared, getting them weaned, getting them out to grass. Even with beef herds, some of the principles I'll be covering are very similar with calf health. And I suppose I look at calf health in three real areas of importance and break it down. I'm out doing training in this with vets at the moment. It's really interesting to have the discussions around, you know, the calf journey from 0 to 12 weeks or 10 weeks of weaning and what happens in there, and, you know, looking at it. I talk about looking at, you know, calf signals, examining calves and all that, but looking at it through the eyes of a calf, because I have this theory, and I'm really going towards it, where we optimize biology in the system. So for young calves, what does that even mean? Well, they have natural behaviours, and if they have natural behaviours and we understand them, it's really key. So for example, feeding milk replacer, looking at what whole milk constituents are like, 12.5% solids, what are they like? Really important to understand to get the natural biology right. Look how, you know, if a calf was normally suckling, they could suckle 8 to 10 times a day. That's, you know, that influences my thinking around how quickly we put calves onto once a day feeding. You know, calves are social animals, they learn from each other. Socialising of calves is good for their welfare, and it's also, you know, it makes them smarter, they get to suckle quicker, and they work better in groups. And how do you manage that on farm? And every farm is slightly different. The volumes of milk that we give calves, and there's big debate about this, and I'm really a believer of more, because if you look at what would a dairy calf naturally almost suckle, they could suckle up to 10 to 14 litres. So if we restrict volumes of milk, yes, we might wean them earlier, but what lifetime effects will that have on them? And even from a suckling point of view, I think it works better. The thermoneutral zone of calves, that's the temperature, and I'll talk about that in housing. What temperatures do calves like? They're totally different animals to cows in the sense of the amount of heat that they produce. Cows have that rumen, which is like a central heating system in there. Calves don't have that, so they don't generate as much heat. You know, most of your dairy calves, they're quite small framed, not much fat cover, and again, that affects their heat. So if we look at very simple things here, really can important. I'm going to get on to the 6 areas, but one thing that I really come across a lot, and it's, okay, is it relevant for farmers? You know, the whole area of cow-calf separation. Why do we remove these calves from their mothers? And there's big debate about this from the consumer perspective, and it seems to be the top issue when I go outside of farming that people talk about with dairying. And I think really, when we, and my approach to this when I explain to people is, yeah, we remove calves because, first of all, you know, within any domesticated food system, it's different to natural biology. We've adapted natural biology because we want to rear calves and take the milk from the cows. The cows have too much milk. Also, genetically, these cows' mothering ability has dramatically reduced over the last 100 years. Now, there is farms that are doing non-cow calf separation, dairy farming. It's still quite niche, and it's responding to these demands of consumers. But in Ireland, if we look at it, we've block calving systems while we maximise grass. So we want to get cows out to grass for as many days of the year as possible. So shortening that window of calving makes for more profitable farming. We've large groups of calves coming together, which creates challenges, but also we can manage those groups more efficiently if we have really clued in on the systems that are around it. So removing that calf, you know, anyone who's been on a dairy farm and seen a dairy calf removed from the cow doesn't stress about it. Now, I'm not saying there's no stress there, but it's minimal, and I'm very happy with that system, because my approach is, yes, we're taking the calf away, but we know the natural biology of the calf, and that's what we're doing in our rearing systems. We're maximising the biology of the calf, whether it be the comfort and all these things here, to make sure that we I suppose we copy what nature, as close as we can to nature. Now, all domestication creates change. We're in the business of producing high quality protein for human nutrition, and look, I always go back to, there's 1 billion people starving, there's 1 billion people overweight, and animal protein is a key component of diet, and we happen to do it very well here. So there is compromises, but why optimising biology? By taking this approach, I think I'm very clear on this anyway. I know people came to listen to calf health, so let's look at the 6 areas that I look at. And I suppose number 1 is colostrum. We'll talk about feeding, number 3, housing, really important. Hygiene, number 4, 5 is calf comfort, what's that mean, and 6 is treatments. Okay, so if we can get these areas really down, we can really improve calf health. But you need to start off, I suppose, here, I've gone out of the screen maybe, on targets. So what are the targets for the farm? What's the daily live weight gain? You know, what's the mortality levels that are acceptable? You know, what do we need to, particularly in pre-wean calves, it should be under 2%. What's the morbidity like? How many infections are we getting? What issues did you get last year? Was it scour? Was it pneumonia? Are these repeat issues? With our challenge on AM AMR, we want to reduce down our antibiotic usage. We can do by being proactive versus reactive. So set your targets, your daily live weight gains, what you want to get from your calf bearing system. And it's all the building block for me. If I was to pick one area on a dairy farm that can make the most difference, is colostrum. And really, farmers are sick of hearing about colostrum. We know, 1, 2, 3, get it in quickly. But colostrum, okay, the young calf is born without immunity. The young calf is immunonaive, often born in colder times of year, particularly if it's spring or winter as it is now. But colostrum is absolutely key. It's got all the energy and protein in it. It's got the immunoglobulins, the immunity that the dam doesn't share with her calf in the womb and has to do through this first milk. It also contains hormones, interleukins and insulin that actually has been shown to improve lifetime performance of these animals. So the young gut of the calf isn't fully mature. There's a thing called epigenetics where these signals are sent to the gut to prime that gut for future performance. So colostrum is absolutely key. It's still number one on farm. So any farm I go on to, I'll talk about looking at the quality, the quantity quickly, and how clean. Obviously, quality of colostrum, you have a dilution effect in your dairy cow, but we can influence that by our pre-calving diet, particularly if we get energy and protein right. Quantity of colostrum, okay, we'll talk about 8% of body weight, a minimum of 3 litres, even for your smaller calves, up to 4 litres of that first milk. So we can also measure quality on farms. Some farmers are using it, doing a Briggs refractometer. Useful because, okay, it tells you what the colostrum is going into the calf, but it also tells you a little bit if colostrum quality is very poor about the pre-calving diet. So I think it's a useful tool that way, certainly for the first calves arriving on farm. Quantity is really important as well, that we get it in. And again, I could spend an hour talking about colostrum because I'm really interested in it, but I don't think that's how you want to spend an hour. Quickly, really important, so particularly for the immunoglobulins. So this colostrum is full of these immunoglobulins, antibodies. The cow has built up these, this reserve or this knowledge of the diseases on the farm. These antibodies are contained in the first milk. They're large proteins, and the young calf's gut actually closes down, not allowing these antibodies to be absorbed as every passing hour. So after 6 to 8 hours, we've reduction by 50%, and after 24 hours, we've virtually zero absorption. So you need to get that colostrum in quickly. And one thing on farms that we probably need to improve on is clean. Okay, colostrum is a high fat, high protein, double the fat and protein you have of normal milk, and that's for a reason, because for the young calf it's to give its energy and fat and those stores to drive it on and get it sucking, and if particularly in cold weather it's really important. So warm colostrum is another rule I will say, but it also is a perfect medium for bacterial growth. Now people will say, sure, it's cold, it's springtime, you can leave colostrum around, but look at you wouldn't leave a pint of milk for 24 hours out on the farm and drink it yourself. Now that you must remember, a pint of milk contains half the fat and protein. So really it's a real medium for bacterial growth. And if we have a lot of bacteria in colostrum, that goes down with the colostrum in the first meal, and those bacteria will affect the absorption of colostrum. Also, the young calf who's immunonaive will be getting bacteria in its first feed. So really we need to look at cleanliness, and that's down around, and I talk a lot about the bottlenecks in the system, looking at how we manage colostrum. Is it dump buckets, is it individual units, are we using buckets on the farm, how regularly we cleaning them, because there's a thing called biofilm. It's kind of a scummy layer, and it's exactly where the bacteria and these pathogens want to hang out. If we let colostrum sit around the buckets, it's a real medium for that. On your suckler cow, again, quality, quantity, quickly, all very important. You don't have as much control over it, because in dairy farms we'll typically take the calf away and we'll either bottle feed or stomach tube that calf as part of that system. But with suckler cows you can still make sure that they're on a clean environment pre-calving. Really, really important from hygiene perspective. So when that calf goes up to suckle that udder, that it's a clean udder that it's suckling on. Okay, so colostrum is absolutely key, and you can actually measure at calf level how much colostrum your calves are getting. So this debate happens all the time about, I've definitely looked after colostrum. When you go and you blood test these calves within 1 to 7 days, you'll often find lower levels, and then it allows you to go back. If you want to refine one system on farm, this is it. Now you must remember, as calving continues as well, everyone gets tired, the system gets harder. It's one of the areas you need to keep focus on, in my opinion. So that's colostrum, absolutely key. The first 24 hours for the calf is really, really important. Colostrum is important. If I look at number 2 there, feeding the calf. So again, I could spend a lot of time talking about feeding, but it's really important after colostrum to get this right. you know, milk replacer versus whole milk. Most people are going to milk replacer. How much transition milk should I be feeding my calves? If you use your scour vaccine, that becomes more important because the scour vaccine works by continual transition feeding. So you need to look at each system. That brings a layer of complexity in the farm. How often, how many days can you feed transition milk for? There's no real difference between milk replacer and whole milk if it's a high quality milk replacer. So there's arguments around skim versus whey, but I think once you have some of the key characteristics of milk replacer down, it's back to optimizing biology. Look at the constituents of normal whole milk and match them with your milk replacer, and that's crude protein being very important. Over 23%, I would say. You can go up to 26, 27%, but over 23. Looking at fat, again, really important as an energy source for calves. But the real key thing is to make sure that the protein in the milk replacer is animal-based protein. If you have a lot of vegetable proteins in there, they're not, calves aren't going to do as well. So I think there's no difference, but it requires a bit of work. Feeding levels, again, we talk about maybe 15% of body weight. It's down to how much would a calf naturally suckle. You know, we want to optimize weaning time. So if we feed calves too much milk, the argument is we won't get them to wean. You will never cause scouring calves by feeding them too much milk. It's just not an issue because they can naturally suckle. So you can push up milk levels. Again, that's a farm by farm basis. Some of the research is pointing to better feeding of milk to younger calves would improve lifetime performance. A lot of that research is based in America, but it's still worth noting, and it kind of makes common sense to me. Now that might affect weaning, but you must remember as well, for a kilo of solids of milk replacer versus a kilo of solids of any other feed over its lifetime, you're never going to get that efficiency as one-to-one from kilo in, kilo on the back. So it is worth noting, but every farm is slightly different. But getting feeding right, obviously you need to have water with the young calf from a very early age. That helps rumen development. They need to get water in as well, just as part of their diet. Clean water, available water. Make sure that water's not slopping into pens, making it messy or dirty, affecting moisture. And then obviously concentrates. Okay, and again, I could spend a whole day talking about this, but concentrates, just some key things. You need to add concentrates in from an early age, as soon as you can, and just small amounts, fresh amounts, regularly, daily, to help intakes with concentrate. Okay, so feeding, that's again a crash course on it, but if you can get colostrum right, calf feeding right. If I look then, one of the big bottlenecks in our Irish system with calves is, you know, what's the perfect house for a calf? And really some simple tips is, and this is an evolving feast I have to say, is, you know, your typical calf shed. Some of the key things you need to manage when I walk into a calf shed, and I use my eyes, I use my nose, I look at the calves. Are they bunched together? Are they hairy? What are they doing? So I look at all those things, and then I suppose the next thing I look at is, I'll use my nose to smell in the calf shed. What is air quality like? So air quality is key, particularly if you're dealing with pneumonia in any stock. Maximizing air quality. Then the other thing I look at is drainage. How much moisture is in the sheds? Moisture leads to the buildup of bacteria, bugs. Moisture also leads to the buildup of causes calves to be cold. So drainage, I was involved in designing a couple of calf sheds over the last couple of years, and the 1 in 20 fall, it frightens people when they see it, but really to get drainage working well is really important, particularly if you're using automatic feeders. So we need fresh air, we need it dry, good drainage, loads and loads of straw. The 2-time straw roll, put in too much straw and then add 50% more. That's a good tip for you. Straw, massive insulator, important for calf comfort. Okay, so how do we manage calves in our housing systems? Okay, our adult cattle will produce heat which rises up and we have an outlet sucking cold air in, but calves don't produce that heat. Again, they're lower critical temperatures, about 10 degrees, even a bit higher, but as they get older and they start that rumen development, it will decrease. But young calves are very prone to cold, and we want fresh air. So getting fresh air in, particularly this time of year, and keeping calves from not getting cold is a challenge. So I suppose if you look at your typical shed like this, and apologies for the drawing now, we still have inlets and outlets. So this inlet here, we're really looking, because calves don't produce much heat, we're looking at natural airflow. So the position of the shed, the long axis is important, that it's to the southwest. and that you have natural airflow coming through a shed. To me, sideboarding, rip out the vented sheeting, even the space boarding, Yorkshire boarding works really well for this. But still, to get fresh air in and down on calves can be difficult, and because our weather is variable. So at this time of year it might be windy, cold, but then it comes to March, you might have a warm day, still day, and that affects air quality. So some of the challenges for calves are around how do we get fresh air in on at calf level, right down where they tend to be in the corner of a shed. So we're looking at positive pressure tubes. I got the pleasure of with a world expert, Dr. Wolf, 2 weeks ago, and we discussed the whole day. We discussed calf sheds, and he's really moving towards this idea of fans, and we looked at a shed actually. They were looking at putting fans inside the shed to push air, to draw air in and push air down at calf level and help that air flow through. So there's a bit of designing in calf sheds again, but if you're getting lots of issues with calf pneumonia in particular, it's a real area to spend a bit of time in. Now, not everyone has to build new sheds, but we just have to think a little bit smarter about some of the key things that affect calf health. Number 4, again, this is a kind of whistle stop tour. Hygiene, really important. Remember, colostrum needs to go into those calves. They're immunonaive, they're more prone to infection. There's a dip between when the colostrum starts wearing off and their own immune system starts building, where calves are susceptible to disease. In Irish systems, we block calving, lots of calves coming together. And what happens is, where do these scour agents come out of, for example? If you think of your rotaviruses, your cryptos, they're in the mother's dung. They may be even in the environment if you look at cryptosporidium. And what happens is if one calf ingests 100 of these, they can produce almost 1 billion out the back. And it always gets to the stage, and this is really important, that we're balancing immunity and infection pressure. Okay, and when you tip the scales, I call it the seesaw, when you tip the scales, when you have too much infection pressure, no matter how good immunity is, you get infection. And that's why we'll often see calf scours occurring as calving goes on. Now, if immunity is low and colostrum's not done, you're going to see issues much sooner. So hygiene is just a way of managing infection pressure. So hygiene is all about reducing down infection pressure. Utensils, pens, having the fresh air in the sheds, disinfecting equipment. Remember, any bottlenecks, and I always say look through the eyes of a calf. What's the calf journey like? And I get some eyes back at me when I mention this. But look at, okay, the calves are born here in this loose pen, they're born in this calving pen, they go into this calf trolley, they're in these individual pens or this group pen. Look at where the potential for hygiene or infection, particularly with younger calves. Again, navels dressed early and effectively, give them a good dousing. Remember, they're a tube into the abdomen, and that's another part of hygiene. One of the simple things with hygiene again is straw. Straw, if you want to look at a great tool for calf health or good calf health, is straw. Dry straw with fresh air on it is a great bed because it allows calves to nestle in. Okay, so hygiene, housing, feeding, colostrum. Calf comfort, this is an interesting one. Again, it's down to the biology of the calf, right? Comfortable calves grow, they're healthier, they're less stressed, they're less immune issues. So if we can maximize this, and one of the big challenges at the moment is cold. Calves don't produce a lot of heat, so are calves cold? How can you address that? More feeding of milk helps that. Plenty straw, allowing them to nestle in, having the right environment in sheds. Calf jackets work really well on dairy farms. On beef farms, I always say I have 1 or 2 in the press for the sick calf because they're nearly as effective as a heat lamp. Again, if you have cows calving down and you've wet calves in very cold weather, some people will use a kind of a warming box set up with individual pens with heat lamps to dry calves off. If you have a calf jacket, there's a quality difference. You need to make sure that the calves are dry, that these calf jackets are breathable, and you wash them between calves. So any bigger farms putting them in really needs to look at industrial washing machines and systems around it. And it's all around systems, and I know I go on about systems, but if you can get this right and tweak all the little details, you can make for very successful calf rearing. So calf comfort again is enough space. I put in space. So if we put in calves, young calves, and we stock them in heavily in a shed, again, you're more likely to infection and pressure disease. Moisture goes up. So you want to be aiming for a calf at 10 to 12 weeks. What space do they want? And I actually have pushed it up to 2 meters squared. And I know I'm not playing for the concrete, but this is a lifelong thing on dairy farms. This is the next generation, getting them off to the best start possible. That's your replacements, and it's equally important, I don't even have to say it, for your male calves coming through the system, if you're not staying on farm, that they get absolutely the same treatment from a welfare perspective, but from a disease disease health point of view, any animal on the farm, 1 week point on any of this, whether it be male or female animals, can be the start of a scour problem. They can be the start of where the system breaks down. Okay, so calf comfort, straw, really, really important. Space for the calf. And again, looking at calves. Calves are fantastic. They'll tell you a lot about them when you walk into a shed. You don't want coughing, you don't want snotty noses, you don't want them grouping together. You want to see them getting up and sucking. You don't want scour, you don't want them sucking nables. Calf comfort. Okay, so I've covered a lot. I'm not even going into weaning today because I think it's a different subject here. If we can get the calves off to the best start in the first 6 weeks. The final area to look at is treatments, and I put down treatments to reactive and proactive. And reactive really is about calves do get sick. We have block calving, we have lots of calves coming. The sooner you can spot a sick calf, the better. Rehydration therapy is so important with calves, and that's oral fluids, getting that right. Even equipment there, having that clean. If you're using stomach tubes to stomach tube your colostrum into calves, it's another thing I didn't mention here and I probably missed lots. Making sure that stomach tube is washed between calves, that you have a protocol for it. And I'll often get guys to just put out a concrete pad with a drain on it and a high pressure hose for washing equipment. And it's all about making the system easier. So reactive, you know, if you have sick calves, if you do have a pneumonia case, you're talking to your vet, what treatment, you're looking at those treatments and you're trying to minimize them down. So two things is you have protocols when calves get sick, you really stick to it. You know, some people who operate isolation pens, that's it, remove and isolate it, particularly scoury calves. I think that works well if we do it early. It gets very difficult if you have a scour outbreak and everything is scouring, but it's worth doing. And that's the reactive treatment. So yes, that calves get sick, but we know exactly what we're doing. And then you can measure it year on year. More important is the proactive treatments, and particularly I suppose the area with calves that we look at is the like of pneumonia vaccines for young calves, particularly if your environment or anything is challenged here, if you've bottlenecks here, vaccines do make a huge difference. Things like preventative coccidial treatments, you look at things like halofuginone for cryptosporidium, or anything else there that's kind of in a preventative space around disease if there's risks in your farm. And I suppose I keep saying it, and I say it time and time again, every farm is slightly different, down to the layout of the farm. Now the principles apply. I better finish off that. Every farm is different because the people are different, to be honest with you, is the biggest difference. The operating system is different. The calf houses might be different. But this, by optimizing this biology in simple steps, and I have a risk-based assessment where I go through all these steps, and that's what I'm doing with vets at the moment, is just going through these steps, thinking out the calf journey, looking at these things, how we lay them out for more successful calf rearing. And I'm increasingly going back to this, whether it's cows or calves or sheep or beef or anything, is looking at this idea of optimizing biology. And for two reasons. I think it really gets productive, healthy animals on farm, and it's a good story because increasingly people are saying, well, we're doing this on farm, we're doing that. A lot of it's perceptions. We need strong stories about what we are doing, particularly when someone asks you about cow-calf separation. Well, we do it because we optimize the biology. And remember, these animals are domesticated. Things have changed, but this is what we're doing to maximise calf health and welfare. So that's it. That's my 6 tips. Number 1 obviously is colostrum. Getting feeding right after that. Housing is really important. It tends to be a bottleneck on farm. It's an evolving feast, as I said, but you know, if we can get fresh air on dry straw with good drainage on calves and get that right, and that sometimes requires mechanical ventilation, not always. Don't overcrowd stocking densities. Hygiene really important for young calves. Again, you know, having the right detergent, disinfectants, and you could spend a bit of time on that. Calf comfort. There's a lot to be said for understanding the behaviours of calves, optimizing them for a better performance. And then when your treatments on your farm, you look at the reactive treatments and you look at the proactive treatments that will make return and investment for happier, healthier calves. And that's it. That is a whistle-stop tour of calf health in this blog this week.